Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for lending me your ears. If you're watching this on a video platform, thank you for lending me those eyeballs. Today, I have a gong. Can I call you gong disciple? A gong, evangelist? Just Devin Reed. Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, man. How you doing?
Thanks, Victor. Thank you. Call me anything you like, as long as it's not 4 letters.
I got you, man. Won't do that, man. Hey, Devin, let them know who you are, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So name's Devin Reed, but I'm currently the head of content strategy over at Gong. Before that, spent about 6 years in sales. So I was an IC for a few years, mostly selling sales software to sales leaders. So a little bit of inception. And then about a year ago, I like to joke and say I must have hit my head really hard because I both got married and moved into marketing in the same month. So now I lead content strategy at Gong, which is our thought leadership, like our research posts, social media, email marketing, and a lot of hats that fall in between.
Yeah, man. So walk me through. You're the first content marketer I've ever interviewed. So walk me through, how does this fit? How does this help salespeople? Go broad and then go deep, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a role. So, it's content marketing is part of the role. Content strategy is something I'm kind of cornering on my own. It's something I kind of came up with at Gong. And it's a unique position at Gong because our content strategy is different than most companies. And so the reason why I took this role is because our goal as content marketing, content strategy is to solve problems for our target audience, salespeople, sales leaders, through our content. And so, I say often, I would never have probably moved into marketing at another company because I don't know those audiences as well. I don't know developers very well. I don't know, finance as well. But since we, our ICP is salespeople, and that's who I've been for so long, that's why I wanted to take on this role. And so that's what I'm doing now. And so we, me and my team create content, all types, from video, written, audio, like our own podcast, all with the goal of, again, educating, of course, that Gong exists, but helping our audience solve problems.
Well, some of the reports, I've talked about Gong on my show at least a couple of times on my Sales After Dark live streams. And because I love the fact that you guys put out content that it's not anecdotal. Do you know what I mean? It's a real data behind it.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you help salespeople, which is why I like you guys, so what are, as you're developing this content, how do you decide what you're going to how do you decide what you're going to do, study?
I would say, so it comes from a couple different ones. So often the best ones are those questions or those, those questions we've asked ourselves as salespeople along our career that we've never really known, right? So things that you kind of trusted your gut, or, maybe you got into sales and someone said, this is how you do it, Victor, day one. And you're like, okay, this is truth to me now. 10 years later, you maybe don't doubt it too much. Or maybe as you're kind of going through a sales motion, you're like, I'm going to ask for time on this email, but I don't know. Should I be asking for time? Should I be asking for interest? Reaching out, and all those little micro nuances and some of the bigger nuances in sales. And so that's what I like to attack. For folks saying I'm clearly in a nursery, the reason I bring this up is because I've had a newborn daughter. And because of that, I've had to force myself to stop cursing. I used to curse all the time, almost with pride, not too many times at people. I'm a very kind individual, but I bring that up because in a sales process, I was wondering, does cursing impact the deal? And mind you, it's not if I'm selling to you, Victor, you cursing at me. If you're like, Devin, you're a bleep, bleep, okay, that's bad. I don't want that. But, selling to salespeople, you get a lot of, type A personalities, you get a lot of confidence, you get some aggressive folks. And, my ears perk up when they would curse. And so I wanted to check, does that impact a deal, good or bad? And so we ran some of the numbers, and what was really interesting and validated my behavior was that deal success or win rates go up if there's cursing on the deal, but there's a really specific caveat, which is only if the prospect curses first. So if the prospect curses first, and then the seller responds with a curse, that has the highest win rate versus no cursing at all, just buyer cursing.
Devin, I swear to you, Devin, I knew this. I knew this already. I used to tell people, I said, when the customer gets comfortable, they just curse in front of you. But it's not a, we could also talk about the tone of the cursing, right? They would just say, the end word, they go, shite, that didn't work out, and you go, okay, they feel comfortable saying something like that too. And I said, yeah, well, that's shite too.
Exactly.
And you felt this, like, you could just see it in their eyes, like, okay, you're with me. We're both on the same page. But by the way, did you find, this is fascinating. I knew this was going to be fun with you, man. Did you, which curse words? You could just give me the first letters. Did you, because a lot of people try to be, I should say a lot of people, it's too general. I've seen a lot of speakers, trainers, and salespeople just, are little Gary Vaynerchuk wannabes. Do you know what I mean? They want to just drop S-bombs and F-bombs and everything else. Did you notice a difference in the type of words that were used?
Yeah, so it was fun we can get into, if you want, kind of how we find this data and how we glean it.
Yeah,
but,
wait.
There was a time where
I'm saying yes. That's exactly why I have you on, because I want to talk about this. I want the dirt, man. I want the gong dirt, man. Come on, that's what I want.
Sure. So I sent it to, we can get into the details, but I'll finish this story. We can get there. I work with a team of data researchers and scientists that work at Gong. And so I kind of prepped them in a meeting, this is what I want to do. And they're like, well, you need to send us a list of curse words. So I Googled most common curse words in America, most common curse words in English speaking countries, and we just did English for listeners. So I'll tell you what, I won't say all of them. There was about 10 or 12, the ones you hear frequently, the ones you're like, yeah, I've heard that one. Nothing too creative. And ran the list. The S word had about 74% of the whole total pie. The F bomb took the rest of like the 23%. And then there's like 1% other, which is like your B words and your like, kind of your tertiary swearing. So that was by far the most common one, which of course we then made a big infographic, chart, put it on LinkedIn and let people go absolutely wild when people were like, yeah, that's me. I'm that person too. And then you get people on the other side who are like, Devin, you're going to go to hell. This is unacceptable, immoral behavior. And I was like, that's fine. I've sold my soul many years ago. I already know where I'm going.
Yeah. What's funny about that is that I could just see you having this idea. Hey, you know what? I wonder if swear words impact the closing of a deal. Let me go talk to my data scientists, my quants, and just ask them, hey, this is what we're going to do. And just the reaction must have been special.
Oh yeah, they're like, oh, this is so they're in Israel, so they're a team of Israel, so Israelis, so there's a bit of a language barrier, but they're like, no, we curse too, yeah, let's do it. Like they love the unique stuff, the more linguistic side of things than necessarily just like sales specific behavior. But yeah, that was a funny one. I think I made a lot of friends when I published that, and I think I made a few enemies. Few people probably unfollowed me that day.
But it was scientific. I think I mentioned I interviewed Amit Bendoff, the CEO, a great guy, by the way. It's the CEO of Gong, man. Just a super cool dude, man. And I even told him, I said, what was the inspiration or the lack of the website? Because I was like, this looks like a colorful mess. Do you know what I mean? The purple, yellow, red. I go, what is that? And then he goes, here's why, Victor. Because we want to be different. And he went to the whole riff about it. And he goes, and you guys have, from my perspective, I'm kind of your ideal client profile, right? From my perspective, I'm like, these guys are so out of the box, doing things differently that it isn't that you're blowing your competitors away. You're stealing mind share. Do you know what I mean? Because you can mention the other guys. You go, well, what was that other name? What was that other company's name? The one that starts with a C. It's got the nice light blue colors, right? And then and then you say, God, that company. Yeah, you guys have really like pushed yourselves, towards the front of this thing. This, by the way, for those of you who don't know what Gong is because you've been living in the cave, Devin, explain what Gong does. What's the platform all about?
Yeah. I'll give you the quick elevator pitch. So we're a revenue intelligence platform. Really what that means is that we capture all the different interactions of a salesperson. So think of the emails that they send with prospects, the calls that they make, the web conferencing meetings. And we take all that and we start to glean insights. So first of all, you'll see what simply is happening across my sales floor, right? If you've got 50, 100, 10,000 salespeople, flipping a switch, all of a sudden you can see everything because we're transcribing and analyzing everything. So you can go in there, it's like Google search. You can go in there and type in your competitor and see across every customer interaction how often they're coming up. And then you can start to see things like analytics, like coaching things like how often is Devin talking versus listening on a discovery call, all the way down to what are the talk tracks that our top performers are using to close deals. And there's a million, use cases in between that. But at a high level, we're giving visibility to sales leaders so they can develop their team and start to understand what messaging is resonating so that they can close more deals and shorten their deal cycles.
Love it. When I was doing my research for my first AI book, the Sales Ex Machina book, one of the things I thought was interesting was, and I forgot who the CEO was, Devin, but it's a technology company, not a competitor of yours. But one of the things he mentioned was, oh, maybe he was a competitor. Yes, he was. And he said only 5% of the sales conversations actually make it into a CRM. And I remember
it might have been Amit. Amit said that for a while too. I think he still does.
Okay.
Might have been.
It wasn't him. I would remember that.
Okay.
It wasn't him. But you concur. The two CEOs concur.
For sure.
Yeah. And I thought that right there was a moment, like a mind blower. If 5% of the conversation is not making it, along comes Gong and some of these other companies who now are capturing these conversations, then analyzing them. And, it's like, okay, this is about to get really interesting. When you look at, again, not only words, sequences, sentiment analysis, tone, and all those wonderful things, but what are you starting to see now that you've gotten, your guys have into this, 2 years, maybe 3, like really like full throttle, like really pulling out the reports.
Yeah, we've been doing it the company's been around for 5 and we've been doing Gong Labs for about 4. Yeah.
Okay. I guess because I've noticed you in the last 2-3 years, I'll just say that. And you guys are pumping out some serious, like real great content for people to use. And I love it because it's not anecdotal. It's data-driven. We're not talking, we just studied 500 phone calls. You guys are insane sometimes. We got 100,000 here, 20,000 here. You're like, question one is, how do you guys manage all these conversations? Like, where do you get all these conversations that you can analyze them?
So it's coming from our product users. So I think we have over 1,000 clients now, ranging from 5 reps to thousands of reps, right? And so as we're capturing them month over month, we're compounding all this. So we have the largest database of B2B sales conversations in the world.
So what's in it for me if I'm one of your users to let you have my content? Because I wanted to ask you this question. I don't want to forget.
Yeah.
Why would I give you my conversations? I mean, they're kind of confidential. I mean, how do I know that it's not going to be used for, so forth and so on?
High level, very secure, GDPR compliant, everything like that. So if you for the teams, LinkedIn's a client. No one outside of LinkedIn can get access to their specific conversations. The stuff that I'm talking about for Gong Labs and the research is completely anonymized. So that's kind of the difference there. And it's all, it's all in, in the contract and stuff, you can see it. It's no one else sees your information. And the stuff that we use for Gong Labs is also the same data set we're using for the AI capabilities, which is, the drill. The more data you have, the better it gets. So we're using it also to kind of like invest back in the platform with the types of analytics that we can start to provide. So, we start to research the data at a high level and we can notice things like, one of our new feature sets is deal alerts. So things like, hey, Victor, you have this deal set to close in 2 weeks, but you've never talked to a decision maker. You've never talked about price, which we know as you've been in sales long enough, you kind of just know. But if you have 40 reps working 100 deals each, a quick barometer letting you know, hey, these 20 deals are at risk because of these reasons. Those are the features that we can create by looking at these analytics and these conversations, going, hey, we've noticed deals don't close if you don't talk to this persona, or deals don't close if you don't talk about this conversation type. And so we can put that back into the product. So it's kind of this flywheel effect.
Got it. And so I, as a user, giving you my anonymized data, right? My anonymized conversations, you're going to analyze that. Do you ever come back to me as a user and say, hey, Victor, here's what we found about your conversation specifically? Do you offer that service or not really?
Yeah, of course. That's part of the customer success role, is to, one, understand where you're at today. Why did you buy Gong and what are you trying to accomplish? And then we have a customer journey and adoption path of different phases. So it's like, as you start out, you're going to see things that are a little more simple, like, talk time and, what type of words are coming up and some basic stuff as you get started. And then as you get more data into the system and as you onboard, you can do some really interesting things like one of the VPs of new business sales over at ZoomInfo, he's been using Gong and he says, I will not let any deal forecasted that has one point of contact. and he uses the Gong information with some BI tools to give him a dashboard so you can see all of his deals and just go, yes, this is good. Yes, this is good. No, this isn't. And he said his forecasting ability has just gone through the roof. And so that's just one example. And we do that for all of our clients. It just looks different, based on the size, the industry, their goals, their growth targets, all that stuff.
I can almost imagine. Do you have any data or anecdotal data just like this one in terms of, I started using Gong, and now I know what my analytics should look like, my business intelligence. And now my forecasting accuracy has gone from 60% now to 75.3% or something like that. Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, we're getting there now. I don't have any off the top of my hand, honestly. Where we're heading towards was, conversations is where we started. Now we're getting more into deals. So things like you mentioned, you see some reports with 20,000 or 100,000, 300,000 calls. Now we're looking more across 10, 20,000 deals and all of the interactions in those deals. And so that's where some of the deal predictability comes in, because as you know, it's not just what happened on the last call, but it's what's been compounding or lack of compounding, I suppose, since you first started talking to them, right? So what sort of insights can we provide you to say, hey, this is what a healthy deal looks like for your company specifically. And here are some of the more general things, of general universal best practices in sales, which are kind of those things I was saying, multi-threading, getting to power, et cetera.
So that's, man, you just blowing my mind with that one, because immediately my brain rushed to, okay, we're going away from conversations to the number of conversations from the beginning of the deal to the close of a deal. And, do you have a number for how many average conversations are actually had, in these deals?
In a deal?
Yeah.
It depends, right? Because, you have SMB teams at HubSpot, which might close a deal in 2 weeks and 3 calls. And then you have enterprise sales cycles that might take 8 to 12 months and, countless calls. So it really just does depend. Yeah. And sometimes for a Gong Labs will segment like, hey, these are SMB and these are enterprise stats. Because, it's tough to say, 30% shorter sales cycle means something very different for those two groups that I just described.
Correct. And so you also within that data, this is like, this exciting to me, man. Just blowing my mind. I enjoy, I love to hang out with you for a day.
I love it too.
What you're doing, yeah. Because now we look at the sales process, right? Whether again it's an SMB or an enterprise deal. Do you guys also incorporate, or maybe it's not part of the machine learning in this case, the interactions via email, post, text, all that stuff? Do you integrate all that? Do some type of analysis and mix it in with the audio? Even though I know the audio is really text. Yeah, exactly. So where we're at right now was we started with conversations. So that was, I believe it was web conferencing. I was the second salesperson, 40 something employee, but I'm struggling to remember the very first integration. So it was like Zoom and a call tool. And then we went, so it's calls and, think of it as like spoken word as the way we kind of presented it early days. Okay.
So, all your Zoom, all your phone calls, not cell phone. And then we just recently launched email. Okay. And now the reason we went from conversation intelligence, we were leading that category, then we created our own revenue intelligence, is because we're moving towards things like, think of the whole buyer's journey, all the touch points you have from that very first, maybe Marketo email, right, to the first SDR email, to the first SDR call, all the calls, and then you get to maybe like a Drift chatbot on your webpage, and then you get to like a DocuSign being sent. And you get to, what was one of the proposal tools, right? So that's where we're going towards, text included, we just launched something for cell phones. So we're going to get to the point where every single type, every channel will be captured. And so you can see, one, for the visibility standpoint, but then you can see, okay, this is what an ideal deal looks like, no pun intended, of, you know what I mean? Like, texting is great for us. Maybe for some segments, it's a terrible idea to be texting, right? We should see. But yeah, that's what we're getting to. And that's why it's really exciting. Probably hear my voice change is to see all these things. Like, imagine knowing, hey, in our business, if a DocuSign's not signed in 9 days, we're screwed. So, you know what I mean? Knowing that, you can start to take some proactive steps, change your sales process up, and make sure that you're hitting on the right notes for your specific ICP and your specific deal set. Yeah.
This has to be like blowing up playbooks almost on a daily basis.
Those are my favorite emails from clients when they're like, we've had one email is really fun. We sent them, we shared with them that analysis of what talk tracks are working best for their top performers and low performers, right? So imagine seeing this dashboard and you go, this talk track, which is very specific to you company, I won't say their name, is like, this is working. And the CEO saw it and was like, wow. And what it was, Victor, nothing you would have guessed as a salesperson thinking value first. What it was a Salesforce connector. The Salesforce connector talk track, because what it did is it took intent data from their website, their proprietary data, and put it into Salesforce so that the company they're selling to their sales team could use that data immediately. That's what was getting deals closed. And they had no idea because it's so, it feels so functionality. It's so feature based. The CEO looked over at the sales enablement leader and said, starting tomorrow, I want every single demo to have that talk track done. So not even overnight, like in that moment, their sales process changed, and now that talk track. And then, of course, they can use Gong to ensure that talk track is being used on every single demo.
I mean, I'm just going to recap for the listeners here because this is like, you're exploding brains, you're exploding neurons right now. Just shoot them all over the place. And that is that, you're analyzing conversations, but as you're building out the full customer journey, you're basically going omni-channel now, right? You're pulling in the chatbot information. Again, the Zoom information's there. You can't do mobile yet. And wherever you get information, you're pulling it in. And even on contracts being signed. And we know what's happening. So all this stuff is now being compiled, machine learning, deep learning, all those wonderful things, mix it in the pot. And hey, by the way, here's a piece of insight. Hey, use that little talk track, that little connector on Salesforce. That's what you want right there.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you guys did a study recently. It was somebody mentioned that. I looked at it real quick. And it was like, when you call somebody, you ask them, how are you doing? That was one. The other one is, did I catch you at a good time? And then the third option was, how are you doing today? Or something like that. And the corny, how you doing? What was it? Do you remember the phrase?
Yeah. So the winning phrase was, how have you been?
How have you been?
That was, because people always go, oh, hey, Victor, Devin here. How you doing? You're like, fine. Who's this? Right. Yeah. And then there was, should I make Victor say it's a good time or a bad time? And so that was the baseline of the report. I think it was like, is this a good time or a bad time? I have to look. It doesn't matter. They both failed. And then the most successful one by like 2 or 3x was, hey, Victor, how have you been?
That was it.
And the reason why is because it insinuates we've spoken before, even if we haven't.
Yeah.
But it's also it's not lying, because it's like, well, I could meet you for the first time and go, hey, how have you been? And you'd be like, oh, I'm doing all right. Right. It just kind of feels more conversational, like you've talked to me before. And so those little nuances. And then, of course, if you're running a sales dev team and you can get one more meeting a week from your rep using that one line, start to compound that week over week, like that's a serious impact.
Yeah, no, I love that. Hey, by the way, I predicted this, that you guys would start consolidating. Right now there's so many technology companies out there that are just offering these different services, and it reminds me of the .com, but not in a bad way. Not in a bad way, like the market's going to go to hell. It's reminding me of then the major players rise to the top, and then consolidation begins to happen. The buyouts begin to happen. Yeah. And so you just partnered with Zoom, which I was like, brilliant. Because I mean, right now, I'm not saying they're the best service. I have my issues with Zoom. If you're listening, Zoom, come on, up your resolution game, right? But they're the big player. They're the go-to. They're the standard now. By the standard, I mean is like the default. Yeah, just use that.
It's like Uber, when you're you say taxi and you're like, oh, I'll Uber there. Even if you're going to get in a Lyft, you say Uber. Now it's Zoom. I was watching Saturday Night. We love Saturday Night Live at my house. Yeah. And you heard Zoom only for like 2-3 weeks, all these skits, Zoom, talking about Zoom. It's like, now, even if you're going to jump on one of the other 12, 20 options, you still say Zoom. So got to hand it to them.
How did that partnership? What did you have any behind the scenes? Maybe you were hanging out with Amit and he kind of said, "All right, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're going to do." And then, how did that conversation come about?
So, I admittedly not on the partnership teams. I talked to Amit from time to time, but not about partnerships. What it came down to is, if you think about the omnichannel approach and what we just said, right, kind of going through all the touch points, you also want to look at where your buyers are. Like, what are they using? And so, shameless plug, you can use Gong to see which product integrations are coming up more frequently. So that helps us guide our strategy. But I mean, like you said, we all know Zoom is crushing it, and everyone wants to be, as close to Zoom as possible. And Zoom is also, likes Gong and wants to be close to us as well. And so one of the big feature sets, and it seems very, it's a feature, but it's really important from like a compliance standpoint, is now when you use Gong and Zoom together, when you join the meeting, there's just a quick pop-up that says, hey, this is going to be recorded. Are you cool with that? And it's just one click. If you say yes, you're in the meeting, it's recording. If you say no, you're in the meeting, it's not recording. It's just a really flawless and seamless experience that helps, compliance and legal teams feel a lot better about using Gong. So it's also, better for our prospects and better for our clients, rather from a use case, just using it's a better experience. And then also helps us continue to sell more because it's an easier, approval process.
So let me see if I understand how this is going to be utilized. I am a company. I'm going to have a conversations. I'm going to reach out to some potential clients. I'm going to have conversations via Zoom. So we're going to record it. Zoom is then going to help me analyze that content on how that one conversation went. Obviously, there's more conversations, but that's really what I'm looking at from a buyer perspective.
Kind of. Think of it more as like, let's say you're using Zoom, right? Like, you're using Zoom already, and you're going to get on the phone with Devin, the sales guy at Gong. And you're going to say, okay, like this sounds really cool. I love the value. Just, I'm sold, but like, how does this thing work? Like, are you going to record my calls? What do you mean? And so, you do get that friction where people just want to make sure that they're being, cautious and going through the right approvals. And so all we're doing is connecting with Zoom. And so when you're like, hey, once you buy and you implement Gong, there is absolutely no change in your seller's workflow. They're still going to send the Zoom link. They're still going to click the Zoom link to join. And when their buyers, their prospects join, there's just that little pop-up window to make sure everyone's on the same page, knowing that the call's being recorded.
Gotcha. And then that information is stored where? Like
back to Gong, excuse me. So everything still is, all the analytics and everything is still in Gong. It's just using Zoom to capture that data.
Gotcha. So it's almost like a conduit. So, I mean,
exactly,
by the way,
exactly.
Yeah, you mentioned the pushback. I mean, initially it must have been interesting to get a lot of pushback, like say 3, 4, 5 years ago, when you're saying, all right, here's the deal. Check it out. What we're going to do is we're going to record calls. And once we record calls, it's going to change all your talk tracks. And believe us, our data's good. Come on. Tell me about the pushback you initially got and then how that shifted over today.
Yeah. So being in a small room, it was, like I said, I was second sales hire. So it's a very educational sell back in 2017.
Were you the second one?
Yeah. It was Jameson, our VP, Alex Vasson, our first, he's now in our enterprise team, and then myself. And so, it was early days. Those days where you're like, I left a publicly traded company for for this.
Man.
Back then you never know. You never know until
back then you go, because I mean, if a guy like Amit would come up to me and say, all right, here's what I want you to do. Quit your job over there. Come with me. I got a purple website. We're going to do this. I would have been like, I don't know.
I naturally go against the grain. I fit the Gong brand very well. I remember being in the first time I was like, when did I become this way? I remember being in kindergarten and it was recess and the recess was over and there was the teacher. She was like, hey, I want 2 single file lines next to each other. Well, if you ever try to get like a 6-year-old next to another 6-year-old quietly, it's insane. Like everyone's going wild. And so I remember just a very early age being like, this would be a lot faster if we did single file. If we just did the way I viewed this, we'd be a lot faster and a lot better. And I'm like, wow, what an absolute conceited, self-centered kid to think that he knew more than the teacher at the time. But all is to say that I love the, going against the grain, thinking outside the box, the loud colors. Like if nothing else, it's memorable. So when you're at the next sales conversation, sales event, whatever it is, you're like, I think I remember them. Yeah, that's Gong, right? And that's year one. We'll go back to the actual question, was getting people to understand the value of recording calls, and that recording was okay. Wasn't, a lot of people just got really worried. Year 2 was like, kind of, how can we make this work? And now, if you want to call it today, year 3, now people are like, I pretty much get it. Let's just get through this through legal, make sure legal's fine, and we'll move forward. But in the early days, it was, hey, we're going to record, transcribe, and analyze your sales conversations and provide. And like right when you finish the elevator pitch, like, wait, you're going to record what? And you're like, oh, damn. Okay, yeah. So let me explain. So we're going to record, and people are like, well, is that legal? What state? And then what you had to become was this. One, you can never provide legal advice because that's not what we are. Mm-hmm. But you had to understand there's 12. I believe it's 12 states in America that are dual party consent states versus single party consent states. So it's like, you get into the technicalities. Mm-hmm. The problem is, Victor, you don't want to get into the technicalities in the first 10 minutes of a sales call about the recording laws in the country you live in. You want to get to like the value. Mm-hmm. So what we learned early on was, the shorter, and again, you check this in com, the shorter those conversations were, is like the highest success rates. Is you want to you want to go high level value, dip into the recording laws and like, yeah, you're fine. Everything's good. And then dip right back up as quickly as possible into the value pitch. And then obviously just get through legal later.
I'm going to ask you an obvious question, but you can answer it any way you want.
Sure.
What is the profile of a successful Gong user? Like, what are some of the best practices that they use that you say, companies do this, they succeed with our product. When they don't do this,
So, I mean, I would say the first thing is, implementing Gong as part of your process. It's not, using Gong is not a Friday at 4:00 afternoon. You're not going to get the most value out of it, but it's also not something that you need to do every hour and like live in Gong. So I would say the most successful teams are ones that make a weekly or bi-weekly coaching session. And what they do, and this is, think of this more like on the frontline rep side of things, right? And the reason why is you can start to hear what good sounds like from other reps, which is something you usually would have to, Victor's the number one rep and I just started here. I got to go buy Victor lunch and hope that he lets me shadow his calls, which is really super annoying because he's a top producer and he doesn't want anything to do with me. I'm some new guy, right? That's how we heard what good sounds like. Or you're relying on role play, which I was a top seller. I hate role playing. It just feels phony. Never been a fan. Super valuable, but I don't like it. Then you get these coaching sessions. And what we would do at Gong, and many people do this, but it's, okay, VP of Sales says, we're going to work on our competitive differentiation for the next month. So from right now to next week's meeting, we did these weekly. I want you to tag me, the VP, in the call right at the moment of your competitive differentiation. We're going to put it in this folder and we're all going to listen to them together, all 8 of us on the team. And so you start to listen, then you go in there, all right, cool. All right, Devin, you're up. You got to listen to your call in front of everybody. And you start to listen, you realize, man, I thought I sounded good, but I sound a little timid. I sound a little weak there. I think I said 14 times. I don't sound very compelling. Mm-hmm. And then everyone goes around the table. What could have Devin done differently? What could have Devin done better? And then you start to get really great feedback, right? And then you get to, Jamie, and you hear her and she crushed. It's a 30-second, the sharpest, most concise thing. And now you go, perfect. That's what I'm going to start doing.
Gotcha.
Right. And so you have this early, now this is just like the first phase of onboarding Gong. Is just starting to get your hands on it and start to hearing what good looks like. The other parts though are a little bit more for like the executive leadership. And that's, I would say is like believing that there are answers that you can use data to answer versus like your instinct, right? Which is like, here's a good example. I was talking to a sales leader and he's like, hey, we're getting our butts kicked from these 2 competitors. And I need to use Gong to figure out what, when, why, where, how, so I can, increase our competitive win rates next quarter. Increasing competitive win rates is a pretty strategic goal, right? It means a lot. Hits market share, hits revenue, touches on a lot of things. So what he did, we were actually in the pilot phase. So he ran it for 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 weeks, we came together and we simply typed in the name of those 2 competitors separately. So one competitor, click enter, across every single sales conversation, came up 20% of the time. It's a lot. Every 5th call, this competitor, from new business to post sale, everything. He's like, all right, yeah, that's what I expected. Then he says, let's type in competitor 2, types it in, 4%. But his sales reps had been telling him that competitor 2 was the reason why they're losing deals. But that's not true because they're not really coming up that often. So what he did is he goes, you know what? Competitor 2 is actually not a problem. There's a few loud people and a few meetings that said that this was a problem, but it's really not a problem objectively. So we're not going to even look at competitor 2. We're going to look at competitor 1. And I'm going to start to use some filtering. And I want to hear what winning, like that competitive talk track, when it leads to a won deal versus when it leads to a lost deal, and start to compare the 2.
Right.
And so now he had a new playbook where he can start to coach his team on landmine questions and how to handle certain objections, what to expect, even like, hey, we like competitor A because blank, and using that blank to provide better intel for their, provide better talk tracks for their team. And so that's how they went about increasing win rate. So again, the kind of recap is like, implementing coaching as part of your process, but then also, using data to answer these questions and to solve these strategic problems.
I'm telling you, that's why I think, look, I come from an engineering background, which is why I think I am in my era finally. I like sales, I like communicating, but the engineering side was always there, right? And so this is my world. Like, like you talk, this is like, oh, this is just keep going, because I love it. It's not anecdotal. I always hated training because it was always anecdotal. And then you always had to go ask Bill or Jill, right? Hey, Bill, how'd you do that? How'd you close that deal? Well, you go in there and you just, say this, say that, and that's how you close the deal. And I'm like, well, that didn't work for me. And they're like, I don't know what to tell you, Victor. you suck. You're like, hey, you're like, hey, wait a minute.
It was that subjective. It was very, and it's based on the scenario, right? That might work for that person or their style, but you need to be trained and coached and get the experience on when to use that talk track and when to use that tone versus times where you should use something completely different.
And that's what's interesting about what you just said, because I don't think this is talked about enough, is that you're listening to a talk track, you listen to yourself, as you said, ooh, sounded a little timid, right? Then you heard the other young lady, and she sounded like champ, boom, stuck the landing, right? Just came off the beam,
exactly.
Stuck the landing.
Yeah.
And you're like, listen to that tone. And that really is the best way of learning, to actually listen to the tones, the velocity, and that's it. Oh, that's how you say it. And then you go back. In one of your studies that I thought was so cool. By the way, just go to gong.io, please. Just if you listen to this, just go to gong.io. Every single report they have, just download. Every infographic they have, just download. Just put a folder on your desktop and just go through the content. If you're not doing it, you and I'm going to say this, Gong and Gartner are like my two pillars of content when it comes to research.
I appreciate that. That's
and that's real good company, and that's sincere. I mean, that's people say, where do you get the great content? Gartner, Gong.io. I mean, just great content. But one of the studies you had, I remember this one, that when somebody mentions a competitor early, it's not actually a bad thing. Explain that one to the audience. I want the audience to hear this one. This was one of your reports.
Yeah, this is one Chris Orlob wrote. So I always give Chris a shout. He created Gong Labs. He was employee like 4 with the meet back in the day. So he's the one who created Gong Labs.
Got to give him a shout out. I interviewed Chris.
Yeah.
Super dude, man. I love him, man. He's a great dude.
He's great. He's been a mentor and a friend for a while. So I'm going to do my best to remember it. And if I'm off, if you fact check me after the show or just look at the report. But essentially what it was is the difference is, people want to say, Victor, should I talk about competitors early or late? And you get the quick, easy answer, which is easy or late, and then you go back to your job and you know what to do. That one was interesting because it was dependent on if it was an emerging market, like a Gong and conversation revenue intelligence, or if it was a more like mature market, right? So things like sales for CRM, let's call it. It's been around forever, and I can't remember for sure. I want to say that in the early market, it was better to talk about them first and position yourself because they were new to the market. They didn't know who you were. They didn't know who your competitors are. So they're kind of like, I've never heard of sneakers. If you tell me Reebok's better than Nike, all right, that's the first intel I have. And now I'm, ingrained that Reebok's better than Nike. And obviously that's subjective, but you know what I mean. And then for saturated or mature markets, rather, it's more, well, I already know, who these players are. It's Salesforce, it's, Zoho and a couple other options. And so the timing dependent there. I'm 85% confident that that's the correct order, but like I said, go check it out because it's interesting. Like a lot of these Gong Labs reports isn't just, one size fits all. It's here's what you thought, but then let's go a level deeper and go really, really into it and go, oh, it actually depends on what market I'm in. I never would have thought of that. I just thought it mattered when.
But that's what makes the data real. It's not, rule of thumb. It's like very contextual. What's the context?
Yeah.
And once you understand the context, you go, oh, that's where I use it. Getting back to the talk tracks, I learned this lesson years ago. I used to work for the company. We used to do some sales training, and I would pitch. And I remember I had to learn a whole script for a whole day, like a full day script, which is like a manual that thick.
Yeah.
And we do 5 sessions, like 5 full days, 5 days a week, obviously. And so we were 1 week on, 1 week off. And we could tell when my sales went down. This is pre-analytics, by the way, when I got off the talk tracks. Because we would go back, because when they saw my sales dip, they would go, okay, pull the tape from this day, or pull the CD, the MP3, pull it out. And then we pull it, and they listened to it and said, let's go through it. And they sample, he goes, okay, right here. See, you went off track right here. And that's what I learned, that being on script is not a bad thing, as most people think, as long as you internalize it and make it yours.
Exactly. The difference is you can hear when someone is reading versus when someone's speaking because our cadence shifts.
Yeah.
If I start reading off this piece of paper on my desk, I'm a relatively practiced speaker and you're going to catch me pretty quickly. And that's why if I'm like, and this, Victor, is why you should buy today. It's like, come on, man. Come on. What are you reading? That sounds terrible. Right. Versus, and for that reason, Victor, that's why I think you should buy today. Totally different, right? And so, yeah, I'm not against scripts and they get a bad rap, but one, there are a lot of bad scripts out there. And then two, you have to know how to, I want to say read it, but really like internalize it so it feels real.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where your platform, it really plays into the right scripts. Let's move into the final part of this, because I want to ask you to kind of be like Nostradamus right here, a little prediction right now.
We'll see. Well, we got to write these down and follow up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna send it to send this to me, and I'll see Chris Orlov. Hey, look what your boy said.
I know.
So when you look at all these players, all these companies that are all around, you see the CRM. The CRM typically sits at the middle, like an ERP system, right? Just sits in the middle. Everybody's bolting stuff onto the CRM. And then we hear phrases like sales enablement, right, to help the salespeople. And then you have these sales. What is the other whatever the marketing uses, marketing automation. The engagement platforms. That's what it is. We have engagement platforms. We have enablement platforms. How do you see this, or what's the future of a salesperson look like in a B2B scenario? How do you see where's that arc, that trajectory going? What are the skill sets that's going to be required 3 to 5 years from now to really be an effective salesperson?
It's a great question. And of course, no matter what I say, there will be people nodding their head and probably an equal amount telling me I'm a fraud. So it is a hot take here. I think it's going to come down to kind of 3 key areas. So one is, and I'll use the terminology so we're all kind of on the same page. So to me, it's sales engagement. Now, whether you're a self-sourcing AE or you have a specialized team of BDRs, SDRs, whatever, the ability to book meetings at the top of the funnel will always be very important. Where I think we're going towards is away from volume, hopefully, and towards, I don't want to say personalization. I think just compelling, human to human messaging, right? Which is like, for example, we hear a lot of, I like to say this, Victor, how many times are you in the kitchen and you goes, I need to leverage the knife. Mm-hmm. You don't say leverage, you say use. I need to use a knife to cut this thing. Right. But so many times we get into, we talk the way me and you are speaking now very casually, and then we get into our prospecting email to Victor and it goes, Victor, our revenue intelligence platform will help you leverage. And it's like this, $20 words. And it's who wrote this? Like maybe a human being, but probably not. And so I think we're going to get to a place where go-to-market messaging is going to be a lot more focused on. I can actually see there be a content strategy role or like a go-to-market, like specialist manager, not necessarily at the level, but that focus of understanding our audience very deeply. What problems are they running into, and how can we problem market using top of funnel messaging? That's what I think the first thing will be. So less of, call it personalization if you want, but I think it's more than that. It's not dynamic fields. It's changing it from this is about us and our product messaging to this is about you, Victor, and I understand you. So I think that's the first thing that will have to be done. The second one, if you kind of go down the funnel, is the conversation, the deal, the things that Gong is working on, which is, I don't know how long we'll be inside. I don't know if we'll move to a hybrid after the pandemic. I'm not sure. I personally think that hybrid or, virtual seller, whatever you'd like to call it, digital seller will be the key. I don't think anyone's going to be exclusively on the road anymore. And so you're going to need to know how to use technology, not only just to connect. Zoom is table stakes, but how can you understand the messaging that works at your discovery phase, at your presentation phase, at your proposal phase, all the way across your segments as a business, right? Because all these act very differently. I think that sort of intel is what's going to shape market leaders from everyone else, people that are taking the time to really understand what's moving deals forward. And then also the types of channels, like we were kind of talking about earlier, like how can I equip my sales team? So Devin knows how Zoom works. He's got, fine email skills, but he's also, we've got text and we've got this and we've got that. Whatever that looks like, whether it's video, whether it's text messaging, whatever these kind of more modern channels are, even though we've been using them forever, I think that will be kind of the second one. And the third is companies like Seismic, which are like your sales enablement content plays, which I think still has a ways to go in terms of people acknowledging the importance of it. But having the right content at the right time of the buyer's journey is so overlooked right now. Right now, we say, sales teams say, I need a customer story, right? I need some stats. Give me something I can share. But then it's used from after the first discovery call all the way to proposal. And like, there's no way that one piece of content is going to speak to the problems and where they are in the valuation process. So companies like Seismic, we're friends with them, partners with them as well. Great stuff. That's what they're doing. So I think it's getting so analytical. We even can equip your sales team to know which content you should use for which type of deal at which point for which ICP, and then tracking that and making it better over time. I think those are kind of the three key things you'll start to see in the next few years.
Yeah, that last one's a mind blower, by the way. Just you need machine learning for that, because there's no way, you know what I mean? Just to be able to pull that. That is amazing. I never even thought about that. Devin, my man, I know you got to run, man. Do your thing, man. But let these folks know where they can find out more information about you. Gong.io, obviously, but you have another website also.
I do. So I'm on LinkedIn all the time, Devin Reed, REED. Feel free to follow or connect. I'm open to both. And then, I also run The Reader, which is a play on the last name. I do some consulting for content strategy, all the things we talked about today, from sales cadences to demand gen, content marketing, all that stuff. So if you're interested, want to work together, give me a shout. So
Gong.io, and then also The Reader, TheReeder.co. If I got it right.
Yeah, .com was too expensive. I'm bootstrapping, so it's .co.
I'm cutting my budget. I dropped the M. Slashing my budget. All right, man. Well, Devin, thank you for your time. And that is it for this Sales Influence podcast. Leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube, or wherever you're watching or hearing us. Also, check out Devin's site, thereeder.co. And after that, check out the Sales Velocity Academy. You know the deal. Over 50 courses, 500 videos if you want to sell more faster. Lastly, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, along with my man Devin, that selling ain't hard once you have the right data and you know how. Take care.